Thank you, Lucy, for that very warm and very generous introduction. My goodness, I've been really, really moved by Edith's presentation, and I'm going to be talking about charisma and cooperation and collaboration. And I'm probably actually going to be using Edith now as an absolutely superb example of that. So what I want to talk about, if I can get the technology to work, is the interconnection between charisma and how we collaborate and cooperate with people. And I want to put this into context. Can I just double check with you guys? Is this thing working? Oh, there we go. Okay. I will point in this direction. I want to put it into context about why I've chosen this particular subject to talk about. As Lucy mentioned, I work with and I develop senior level executive assistants and PAs. And for the sake of this presentation, I'm probably going to be using the term PAs because otherwise my brain will start to bleed. I know how many different job titles we've got in this room. When I'm talking about PAs, I'm talking about everybody. One of the things that I work with most of the PAs is their leadership skills. We know where the role used to be. It used to be a very reactive, technological-driven role. Now, of course, we still need to be absolute superstars when it comes to technology. But I also want to think about the leadership skills that we need to employ. The role has developed and grown into standing shoulder to shoulder with senior executives in a leadership sense. And that's what I want to think about, the behaviours that we need to be using to be credible and to work collaboratively with people. So what I want to think about is what charisma is. And it can be summed up in this statement here. Compelling attractiveness or charm that can inspire devotion in others. Oh, we all want a bit of that, don't we? And the reason it's so important, because as PAs, as assistants, we don't work in an isolated way in any way. We rely on cooperation and collaboration from so many different people within our working lives. Our business success is reliant on other people working cooperatively with us. So how we get those people to work effectively with us is absolutely essential. And that is down to our behaviours. So what I want to think about is really unpick those behaviours and how we can be developing that, and in turn developing those relationships within our working lives. Charismatic people are positive people. I have yet to come across any individual that I consider charismatic that is sitting being grumpy in a corner moaning. It is essential that we project ourselves as positive go-getter people. If we do withdraw into a corner and grumble and moan, people will not want to be around us. They will not want to work collaboratively with us. Charismatic people get things done. There's a sense of perpetual motion around people that have charisma, and that's really addictive. We want to be around that. And it's charismatic people that change the world. There are two assistants in particular that I've met over the years who I am in absolute awe of. And they have a huge amount of charisma. They have confidence, they have warmth, they have charm. And they have changed the internal culture of their very large global organisations in how the assistants are viewed and treated within those companies. They have literally changed internal culture, where they both went into quite reactive roles that weren't well thought of. They are now active and fully integrated members of their leadership teams, and they are giving advice, guidance, and support to that leadership team. So I want to think about who has charisma, and maybe who doesn't as well, because sometimes it's actually very useful to look at an example of someone and think, actually, you really do not have charisma, but why? So that we can avoid their mistakes. And I also want to consider whether it's innate or learnt. There are different opinions on this. My opinion is it is absolutely a learnt skill. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of people that we can clearly see have transitioned from quite uncharismatic, shy, introverted people, how they've turned into amazingly inspiring people. That doesn't mean they're loud and aggressive. Some of them are very quiet and very still people. But I want to think about some of those skill sets. Before I do, I'm going to go through some slides, some photographs of people that we'll all recognise. And I want you to be shouting out to me and telling me whether you believe these individuals are charismatic or not. So let's start with the gentleman on the screen. First of all, who is he? Nelson Mandela. Every single person in this room recognises him. Would you say Nelson Mandela is a charismatic individual? Yes. Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. We all instinctively know that. Look at those eyes. You would follow him to the ends of the earth, wouldn't you? And many people have. JFK, charismatic? Yes. Famously charismatic. And I'm going to linger on JFK for a moment, because very interestingly, when he was elected to President of the United States in 1960, it was at a really interesting time of how our global communication systems were changing. Television had only just been invented. And in 1960, it was the very first televised debate of a presidential election. This is a photograph of it. Now, Nixon had been in hospital, he'd broken his leg, he'd suffered from flu, he was pale, he was underweight. Kennedy, on the other hand, had just come back from campaigning in California. He was tanned, he was healthy, he was very confident because he'd been well received in California. Now, the research that took place following this very first televised debate cannot ever be replicated. It's a once-in-a-lifetime piece of research. Because only half of the population had access to television sets, half of the population listened to this on radio. The research carried out afterwards demonstrated that those who listened to it on the radio thought that Nixon emerged the strongest candidate. Those who watched it on television said that Kennedy had emerged as the strongest candidate, which I think is absolutely fascinating. And this event, this presidency, is believed to have been won or lost on charisma. Now, we all know now, and then in the UK a couple of years ago, we had the very first live televised debate of our three political leaders. And you can bet your life that those individuals were primed with an inch of their life on charismatic skills. They would have had every stray nose hair plucked from their nose. They would have had the choice of 20 shades of pale blue for the tie, or whatever it is, because we now know how important charisma is. Whereas at this time, it was a very new idea still. Steve Jobs, charismatic? Yes? Steve Jobs is interesting because internally within Apple, he was really feared. His charisma is largely believed to be external. There's a reason he's wearing a black polo neck against a white background. He was always photographed like that. He very carefully created his image. If you go onto Google and look, I think it's around 84 that he made his first couple of speeches, you see a very, very different individual to this man here. You see somebody quite introverted, not confident in public speaking. But we all know, I hope most of you have managed to sort of watch some of his speeches, they're incredibly charismatic, inspiring, though that is a learnt skill. But that was very much public. Behind the scenes, he didn't display those charismatic skills quite so well. Anita Roderick, the founder of The Body Shop, one of my personal heroines. I think she is amazing, very sadly died of cancer a few years ago. Somebody who's compassionate, kind, incredible leader. Charismatic or not? Yes. Okay. Very different style of charisma. You can't have more of a contrast between Anita Roderick and Hitler. Okay? But we're recognising a hugely charismatic individual. When Lucy asked me to do this presentation, and she asked me to come up with, she said, do something new, Susie, do something that you haven't done before. And I was like, okay. I sat there and had a complete brain freeze. And I was watching television that evening, and there was the BBC did a two-part documentary, and it was called The Dark Charisma of Hitler. And it was absolutely fascinating. I'm going to go into the different styles of charisma shortly. So we've got Hitler. Oprah Winfrey, charismatic? Yes. Absolutely, I believe so as well. Successful, powerful, wealthy, warm. Next slide. Does everybody recognise this lady? Karren Brady. Incredibly powerful woman. She, when she was very young, in her early 20s, took on and went into a very male-dominated, aggressive industry, the football world. And she turned the fortunes around of a particular football club. She's now, of course, a television personality, all the rest of it. Has she got charisma? No. You're saying no. Some people are saying yes, some people are saying no. Okay, I'm going to come back to Karren Brady. That's an interesting response. Obama. Charismatic, without a shadow of a doubt. Those who have met him report that they feel, once they've talked to him, that they have been the only person on the planet. I do feel slightly anxious talking about American presidents with some Americans in the room. I'll come and chat to you and check out afterwards whether this is all good. But Obama, and the same with Clinton. When everybody spoke to him, they felt like they were the most important person on the planet. So very charismatic. Right, does everybody recognise this lady? Okay. I think this is a really interesting example of how somebody can change their public perception. When she very first came onto our television screens, she was called, and I loathe this term, but I'm going to use it, she was seen as a ball breaker. She's a multi-millionaire, if not a billionaire, hugely successful, but was seen as very, very hard. Now, if you Google her through photos, you can see just through the photographs the transformations that she's been through. Deborah Meaden. She runs a leisure empire, and she's also on a business television show in the UK as well. She was seen as a very hard individual. She has softened her image considerably. And I'm going to go on to talk about that. Winston Churchill. Again, in terms of charisma, I think this is interesting. I wonder if these days we would accept an obese, chain-smoking, heavy-drinking leader. Incredibly charismatic, but the way we change and think about that changes as well. Okay, Condoleezza Rice, another one of my heroines. Charismatic? Yes? Okay, I believe so as well. Incredibly powerful woman. When she was in the White House, she was largely considered the most powerful woman on the planet. And I'm going to come back to her as well. Thatcher. Charismatic? Ah, I wasn't sure what you were going to say on that one. I think she was incredibly charismatic. Some people will disagree with that, I think, which is absolutely fine. She's in direct opposition in terms of the charisma that Steve Jobs displays. Whereas Steve Jobs was very overt outwardly, inside he was disliked, inside the organisation. Thatcher was reported to be unbelievably charismatic inside the four walls of her working environment. She was exceptionally kind and nice to her domestic staff and all the other people that worked around her, which I think is an interesting thing to think about, whether some people are charismatic internally and some people project something externally. Diana. Charismatic? Absolutely. I think she's probably the epitome of charisma, and I'll come back to her. Marilyn. Charismatic? Absolutely. There's a very famous story of Marilyn. She was on the subway system with a reporter, and she had no makeup on, she wasn't made up, she wasn't sort of dressed up, and nobody noticed her. Then she went out onto the pavement or the sidewalk, and she said to the reporter, "Would you like to see her?" And she changed within a split second from Norma Jean to Marilyn. And all she did was change her posture and fluffed up her hair and connected with the outside world. And she was mobbed. And that's a really clear example of how we can become charismatic and the power that it can have. I literally have sleepless nights over Gordon Brown. While I do believe that we can learn charismatic skills, nature provides exceptions to every rule. I just don't know how to explain him. He has been trained and trained and trained in how to be charismatic. There are some hilarious YouTube clips of him doing a very serious speech. Blah, 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 blah. But we can develop our skills. They're 1 in a billion, these ones. Okay. Every administrative professional and PA in this room today is female. Does that matter? Is it relevant in terms of thinking about charisma? No? Yes? Okay. My perspective is it does matter. I'm going to tell you the perspective I'm coming from. The perspective I'm coming from is I'm a feminist. I've studied feminist politics. My entire life, professional and personal, has been around supporting women, professionally and personally, to be amazing. I'm coming from a place where I want women to succeed. I know the strength we have. I think women make equally good leaders. But I want to think about charisma in terms of how we view it in men and how we view it in women. Because when I was putting this deck together and I was selecting my photographs of charismatic men and charismatic women, I really started to struggle. The charismatic men were easy. The charismatic women were slightly different. It's not that I couldn't find the successful business leaders out there that were female. It was about how I was viewing them in terms of charisma. So I do want to think about the photograph of Diana and the photograph of Deborah Meaden and Karren Brady. Because we feel differently about those women, don't we? I think for women, warmth is crucially important. It's not about pandering to male egos at all. It's about considering how we will be viewed and the impact that we have on other people. I'm not saying this is right, I'm not saying it's fair, but I am saying we need to consider it because we do have different expectations of women and men. I'm going to talk about serial killers for a moment, just to lighten the mood. If we have male serial killers, we kind of get it. We kind of understand that there are men out there that can turn into that. The examples we have of female serial killers, our revulsion is that much deeper. And it's that I'm kind of trying to think about. There is an expectation about what we want from women. I'm not saying this is a barrier to our success. It's not. But I do think we need to consider when we're thinking about charisma and the impact we're having on other people, we need to take this into account. There is one thing I want to flag up at the moment, and that's this. Charismatic behaviors, once you learn them, give you a huge amount of power in terms of how you're influencing people. And I do want to think and just flag up that manipulation can be part of that. I think as women, we kind of know how to manipulate. It's a short-term strategy. It has no place in business. What we're talking about is establishing and building long-term, positive, collaborative relationships. If we learn charismatic skills, we will get those things, those rewards back from the relationships, the business relationships around us. But do be warned that it is a short-term strategy and you will be caught out. Hannibal Lecter was very charming. And I'm sure we've all come across at times in our lives people that have manipulated us. And it is people that abuse that are not healthy to be around. So we need to be avoiding that at all costs. Okay, I want to now move on to thinking about charismatic behaviors. Clearly, there were very different styles in the people that we've just seen. And I want to think about the 4 key styles. Let's start off with the 3 key pillars of charismatic behaviors. And they're these. And it is these 3 pillars combined that give us incredible power in terms of how we're affecting those around us. presence, power, and warmth. And it is the combination of those, it is each of those three pillars that we need to be thinking about in terms of our own behaviour. So let's think about the styles. I want to start off with focus charisma. And we'll use some of the examples of some of the people that we've seen. Focus charisma is around presence, and all four of these styles have confidence on them. And I'll talk about that more in a moment. So presence is around being completely engaged with another human being. It's around our body language, how we're looking at them, and whether that person knows and genuinely believes that they have our full attention. Sometimes we think we can fake presence. We can't. The brain clicks into understanding and responding to body language far, far quicker than anything else. If we're not 100% present with another human being, we do know that, and the other person will know that. And the consequence of that is that that person will be thinking, okay, so they're thinking about what they're going to make for tea tonight. That's far more important than having a communication with me. It's a demeaning feeling. It's not a good feeling. So developing our presence and being aware of how we are responding with another individual is important to develop. We're hardwired as human beings to be distracted. If you think back to the Neanderthal man, if you weren't distracted by, I don't know, some predator crashing through the undergrowth, if you weren't distracted by that, you'd end up dead. So we do allow ourselves to be distracted. It's about practicing being in the moment with another individual. And it's a really strong part of charisma. Then we move on to visionary charisma, and that's about belief. Steve Jobs was a visionary, charismatic. Who else would you consider? Gandhi? Martin Luther King? It's all about the passion that somebody generates in you. If they are so excited and so with you on an idea that you think, I will believe and I will follow this person anywhere. And again, it's about coupling that with different elements. So we have our belief charisma. Then we have our kindness charisma. Diana, of course, was the master at this. And it's about really giving yourself to another individual and not using our own judgments. People that are very rigid in their own views, that are quite selfish with what they want to achieve, very focused on their own agendas, lack this. And we all know how difficult it is to be around rigid people that don't listen to our own ideas. So kindness and warmth. Then we have status and confidence, the authority piece. Now, as PAs, we do have given to us a certain amount of authority through our roles. What I want to think about is how we portray that through who we are as human beings. And it's often around believing in ourselves, but also allowing other people to see how much we input and impact the leadership team and our own executives. It's our internal world that drives our external world. Anything that goes on in here or in here is going to, A, leak out through body language, but it drives all of our behaviours. It is so important to start thinking about how we can change our internal world to impact our external world in a really positive way. I want to think about uncertainty for a moment. As human beings, it's one of the most unsettling feelings and experiences that we can go through. The reason we are drawn to charismatic people is because they are certain. They display certainty. Certainty in ourselves allows other people to believe in us. If you think about the photographs of the people that we saw, did any of those people come across as uncertain? Absolutely not. And that's powerful. But that starts up here. If we don't have absolute 100% belief in ourselves, we will come across as uncertain. So I want to think about how we create a charismatic mindset. Now, these 4 blocks up here are what senior level executives and leaders will go through. So if you think about Obama for a moment, does he come across as a selfish person? Absolutely not. Because he's gone through these types of readjustments in his own mind. So I want to think about visualization to start with. Now, this is all starting to feel a little bit fluffy. It's not fluffy. It's about giving yourself that air of certainty. Yesterday evening, I came into this room after you guys had left for drinks and whatever, and I came and stood on the stage, and I imagined the room exactly as it is now, with all of you standing here. And I visualized, I didn't do a proper run-through of my speech, but I did visualize what I wanted you to see, what I wanted to feel, what I wanted to convey. And I coupled that with listening to particular music, very high energy, very positive music. So it's about creating something very positive. And most public speakers will use this technique. All leaders are public speakers, and they use these techniques. If you are feeling anxious about participating in a board meeting, visualize it. Really unpick what you want to be seen as. And then that is your end results objectives, and all of your behaviors need to be fitting with that end results objectives. Visualize yourself standing up confidently within the board meeting, delivering your message, the positive reaction for the rest of the leadership team. So visualize what's going on. Gratitude and appreciation. In my bedroom, on my chest of drawers, I have 2 clay feet that I found when I was picked up when I was in Malaysia. And they're actually a Chinese tool to be grateful for everything that you have in your life. People that are grateful come across far more positively than people are sitting there grumbling about what they haven't got. Do you know what? There are things in my life that I wish I could have had in my life, but they're not there and I can't change it. If I hung on to that, I'd be a horrible person to be around. And I was for a little while, because it takes time to get through that stuff. We've all gone through it. But I'll tell you what, I am so grateful for my friends, my family, the relationships I have, everything. And just being grateful for what we have changes who people see in us. And appreciating and valuing everything and everyone. And then we come on to compassion. Yesterday evening, I was standing outside having, just getting some fresh air. It was fresh air. And a chap came up to me. He was from Ireland, and he was really kind and really sweet. And he came up to me and he said, look, the first thing he said to me is, do you speak English? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And he said, look, please don't think I'm being rude. I'm homeless, and I'm sleeping in the chapel around the corner tonight. I'm not an alcoholic, I'm not a drug user, but I am absolutely starving. I'm really, really hungry. And I said, no problem. And I got him a £5 out of my purse, and he looked at me and went, are you sure? And I said, yes, absolutely. Now, sometimes when I'm asked for money from people, I'll give, sometimes I won't. But something happened to me yesterday daytime. And so someone was very kind to me. It was at it wasn't the railway station, it was a taxi driver. They were very kind to me. And actually, it's about passing that on. And it's a nice feeling. And it changes who we are and who people will see. When I was putting this slide deck together, I'd been working on it for about 6 hours, and I was getting a bit of a headache, and I had various things to do before the deadline, and I was generally getting quite stressed. And I thought, right, I actually need to take a break, and I need to pop into Caversham where I live and pick up a prescription or whatever. I also had a friend who had just submitted their dissertation for their masters, and I thought, right, I'm going to pick up some champagne for them as well. So I'll do that at the same time. And I went into Caversham, and I had a bit of a headache, and I was really rushing about, and I was very internal focused. And I went into Waitrose, And it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and all the mothers were there with their prams and all the rest of it. And there were elderly people in there, as though they were on a day out at the park. And I just wanted to whiz in there and whiz out again. And I bustled my way up, with people getting in my way, bustled my way up to the wine section, picked up a bottle of champagne, which was actually boxed, but it was security tagged as well, bustled my way back down to the where you pay for it, the tills. And this woman was really struggling to get it in and out of the box that it was in, to get the security tag off. And I was standing there thinking, I've got to get back, I've got to get back. Now, overtly, I don't think my body language was doing much. I'm sure without a shadow of a doubt, though, she picked up, there's an irritated woman here. And then I stopped. And I thought, do you know what? She's probably been standing behind that counter for 5, 6, 7 hours. She's probably shattered. She's probably had really grumpy people all day. And I changed my mental state about it. And for the first time during that interaction, I actually looked at her properly. She was actually really, really pretty, and she had the most amazing eyelashes. And I just looked at her and I said, your eyelashes are fabulous. I said, oh, thank you. She said, my daughter's got them as well. Everyone thinks my daughter wears mascara. She's only 11, she doesn't. And we had a really pleasant interaction. I was in there for exactly the same amount of time. But just by changing my mental state around that, changed everything. What really struck me, though, was when I walked out of Waitrose, how other people responded to me. There was a gentleman who held the door open for me and beckoned me to go through before him. So I'd stopped being internal looking and I started connecting with my environment. And it made me more charismatic. And the way people responded to me was positive, not negative. And that was a really powerful lesson to me. It's a simple lesson, but it's powerful. Goodwill. If you were driving down the motorway and a car cuts you up and you're late for work, you've got to get the board papers out, people are going to be screaming at you, and this person cuts you up and slows you down, the mental state we usually get into is, there's blooming womble, what is he doing, blah, 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 blah. And we really work ourselves into a state, blaming that other person. Rewriting that reality and showing goodwill to someone else is powerful of how we control our emotions. So if we think about it and this person cuts up, if we start to think this idiot just doesn't know how to drive and we start to get angry, we start to get irritated, if we reevaluate that and rewrite that and think there might be an alternative explanation to this, if we think, do you know what, that might be a mother with her daughter choking on a boiled sweet on the back seat. And she might be desperate to try and get over to the hard shoulder to sort out the situation. The second we rewrite that, we become calmer. And we stop judging. Making sense? Okay. So, it's about neutralizing negativity. In this instance, I'm talking about the negativity that goes on inside us. About that internal dialogue that really damages how we feel about ourselves. We can rewrite that. It's about having automatic thought processes. They say that our personalities are formed by the time we're 7 years old. Do I think that can be rewritten? Yeah, I do, actually. I think that we can retrain ourselves how to think more positively and how to neutralize some negativity that we might have picked up along our lives. I really do believe that. It's about when we have that negative thought, what's the basis for this? Is this really how it is? Or am I putting my own personal stance on this? How can I rethink this? So neutralizing negativity, becoming more positive, allows us to be seen as more charismatic. It's rewriting reality. The story I just told you about driving down the motorway, really strong. Now, I have a friend of mine who's usually a very good driver, but she can get very impatient with slow drivers. And I'm quite a confident, fast driver during the daytime in daylight hours. When it's dark, I really struggle. Normally in the daytime, I will go faster than the speed limit. Not much faster. During night time, I get a little bit disorientated. I try not to drive at night, but of course you'll have to. I'm a little bit more unsure of distances and that kind of thing. And I'm a slower driver at night. So in a 60-mile-an-hour limit, I might go 50 because I want to stay safe. Occasionally, somebody will come up right behind me. And this is what my friend does as well. And it terrifies me. It really scares me. And I try to explain, well, I did explain to my friend the effect of her going right up close to another car has on that driver. Because whatever we're going through, it has a roll-on effect onto somebody else. Now, I'm sure it does irritate people that I'm going slower than the speed limit, but I'm not doing it purely to wind them up. I'm doing it to keep myself safe. So I've asked her to rewrite her reality when she's driving too close to someone, because actually it's not going to get her there any faster, but it's going to have a negative impact on somebody else. Now, when we're in our cars, it doesn't matter necessarily whether we're charismatic or not, but it's this type of rewriting that we can be thinking about having a positive effect on other people. So let's think about some strategies of how we can become more charismatic. Got 5 things up here: listening, vocal power, physical space, body language, and uniforms. I'm quite relieved nobody's down here in their dressing gown this afternoon. We've all conformed to a uniform. It's a conference because we come from different areas of the world, different cultures. We have got different and individual styles of dress. Thank goodness, because otherwise it would be incredibly boring. But nobody's come down here thinking, oh, right, I'm just going to wear my dressing gown today. Had a bit of a late night last night. Nobody will notice. I'll still be fully covered. It just doesn't matter. Now, we know that actually we have to comply to a particular uniform. And all organisations have their own internal uniform. One of the EAs that I coach is the EA to the Chief Exec or the Managing Director of Diesel. Diesel, obviously, a very casual jeans company. First time I went in to meet her, I was suited and booted. I felt like such an idiot. Such an idiot. I should have pre-thought about it and thought, they're going to have a uniform. And I should have gone in there far more casual. Now, in terms of charisma, yes, we can develop our own individual style, but please don't underestimate how important uniforms are. It's not about forking out on a Chanel suit. It's about thinking about, what is this message? What am I wearing? What is the message that I'm giving out to other people? Does it say power, confidence, charisma? Anybody ever seen Condoleezza Rice in a pair of jeans? No, I haven't either. So it's about considering your uniform. Body language is singularly the most important thing that we can be developing in terms of our charisma. It's about confidence. It's about eye contact, and I will go on to talk about eye contact in a moment. I also want to think about physical space. A moment ago I showed you a slide that said it's our internal world that drives our external world. If we live with an internal rule that we are not valued, not important as assistants, everything that Eth was saying, absolutely everything, coming away from that idea that we're not valued. If we start to really understand that we are an integrated member of our leadership teams, that our skill sets are just as valuable as every other single member of that team, we have to walk into that space, that mental space, because if we don't, it'll show through our body language and how we physically walk into a room, where we stand in a room. We'll shrink into ourselves. It's about making ourselves big. It's about saying, I'm here, rather than shrinking into the shadows, keeping out of the way. Little girls should be seen and not heard type of thinking. So everything that Eth was saying. Listening. It's the presence charisma piece. It's so powerful. It's about really engaging with another human being, not interrupting them, not forming our responses before they've finished. It's about questioning, tell me more about that. Looking at the whites of their eyes so that person is feeling listened to. And then our vocal power as well. It was Margaret Thatcher that was very famously had vocal coaching. because she did have quite a high-pitched voice, and it was seen as not having any power to it. Think about how we respond to a squeaky teenager's voice, that's breaking, and then we have somebody that has a much deeper voice. The deeper your voice, the more power it holds. Pauses. Charismatic people don't babble. They speak slowly and clearly, and they have the confidence to do that. So, the eyes. I said I'd mention the eyes. There's nothing more powerful than the eye contact we make with people. If there is one thing that you can change in terms of developing your charisma today over networking, it's to be present and to be holding someone's eye contact. Body language, eye contact doesn't always feel comfortable for us to change. It doesn't matter how it makes us feel. It's how it makes somebody else feel that's important. Be present in a moment with someone. Have you ever been in a situation where you've been chatting to someone, talking to someone, and they've just, for a split second, glanced over your shoulder? They've lost you already. They have lost you at that moment. It's a horrible feeling. When we want to be present and engaged with someone, it's about that eye contact. Practice it over lunch. When you are talking to people, hold that eye contact. So, our 3 pillars: presence, power, and warmth. If there is one of those that you ignore, you will be in a weaker position to positively influence those around you. I mentioned earlier about, do we need to do this differently as women? I think the warmth piece for us is more important than it is for men. It pains me to say that, but it's how we are judged. And as our position as assistants, we are constantly battling against the legacy of what the role used to be. Little girls just sitting there typing the letters. We know that has changed. We have to re-educate, often middle managers, more senior people, that actually that is not what we are. We are part of the success of the leadership team. We deal with very big egos within our working environments. Sometimes male egos, sometimes female egos. If you think about the female photographs of leaders I showed up there, it was the ones that displayed warmth that you said had greater confidence, charisma. So I do think we do need to take that into consideration. It's not about being weaker, it's about being stronger. So, why does this matter? Because all of our relationships are interconnected. We cannot be successful assistants without positive relationships. That's with our own execs, it's with the wider leadership team, it's with middle management, all the way down the organisation, but also external to the organisation as well. And there's a difference between cooperation and collaboration. Cooperation is more of a transactional relationship. There's no depth to it necessarily. You're both working towards getting the same thing done. You might be just trying to buy a bottle of champagne. And it doesn't matter how deep that relationship is. But if we really want people to change their view of us and us to develop our authority, our respect, our power within the organisations, we need to go deeper than cooperation. We need to go to collaboration. So collaboration is more than the intersection of common goals seen in cooperative behaviours, but a deep collective determination to reach an identical objective. If we develop our charismatic skills, those relationships with the key people in our working lives become much deeper. The photograph I showed with Richard Branson earlier, the definition of charisma, about that magnetism of people wanting part of who we are, what we are. If we can develop that in those around us, won't our lives be so much easier? It's an incredibly powerful thing to do. I want to finish up with one slide in particular. I'm often asked to define what makes the top assistants in the world. And I have been unbelievably privileged to meet some of them, and some of them are here. And I'm sure the rest of you, I just haven't met you yet. I'll be changing my mind once I've sat down and talked to you. But a couple of years ago, I sat down and I took kind of the top 10 assistants that I knew, and I really unpicked their skill sets and the behaviours that they displayed. And it was these 9 words that described every single one of them. They were able to demonstrate authority, respect. They were results-driven. They displayed strong emotional intelligence. They were aware of the impact that they had on other people. They were aware of their own triggers. They were strong communicators, both verbally and written. They were able to influence upwards, sideways, downwards in a positive way. They displayed leadership skills. They were able to provide direction. And as PAs, I know that we are very good at meeting expectations and deadlines. The top assistants are able to set expectations and deadlines. That is about what's going on up here, whether we feel we have the right or the permission to be going to the leadership team and saying, we need to tighten this process up. This is how we need to be looking at things. So it's providing direction. And of course, collaboration. None of those top assistants in the world are sitting there grumpy in a corner, not wanting to play. They are actively going out and developing those positive, long-term relationships with everybody that matters to their business success. Okay. So, do we have time for some Q&A? Okay. So that's my presentation on charisma. I know that we've only had a short time together, and therefore some of the stuff that we really want to go into depth a little bit deeper, we just don't have time to today. But if you do have any specific questions around anything that I've just been talking about, speak now or forever hold your peace. Lucy, down here.
I just want to make you run from the table.
Just making you exercise.
I wonder if you can tell charisma from electronic communication.
Say that again.
Can you determine charisma through electronic communication?
Yes, I think you can. I think email has tone to it. I think we need to be doubly careful when it comes to our written communication, which is just pure written communication. In terms of how communication is broken down, body language makes up 55%, our tone is 38%, and our verbal communication, the words, the content of what we speak makes up 7 to 15%. Now, unfortunately, I didn't manage to catch all of the email one, but I've heard Monica speak before, and I know that Monica speaks about email tone, and our tone definitely is in an email. We have to be more careful because we are missing those large chunks of tone within a voice and also the body language piece. So, yes, you can be charismatic. Charismatic largely is about charm. It's about understanding that another person wants to be valued. Now, I'm feeling a bit nervous because I don't want to contradict what you guys were talking about on email earlier and I wasn't in the room. But it is about kindness, about imagining how that could be interpreted, because the written word is about interpretation, and we have to be doubly careful. So yes, you can absolutely be charismatic, and it's about gratitude, it's about thanks. The kind of the things that I was talking about earlier in terms of creating a charismatic mindset. And creating the charismatic mindset, it's about changing who you are so that everything that does come out of you is positive and charismatic. So you don't have to think about, I have to do that, and that. It starts up here, and once you've developed it in here, then it automatically comes, rather than actually changing a behaviour external to you. It's about who you are inside. Thank you. Any other questions around charisma? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Lucy A, for inviting me along. And I know it's very unwise to keep a room full of women away from the chicken satay at this time of day. So I think Lucy's going to come back up just for a moment.